Oh goody, it's the boss rush stage.
I may or may not have an obsession with boss fights, and I could go on and on about what makes them great, like their build-up, their music, their setting, the satisfaction, but I won't since you heard all that before. Wait, I did? Well, that's the perfect setup for today's topic. For as long as there were boss fights, there were boss rushes. Before continuing, you had to fight bosses you fought before, or a set of bosses in a row to progress the game. Usually an easy way for developers to extend game time, it's often seen as the least appealing game mechanic, especially when it's forced on you, otherwise known as being mandatory. So today, I'm looking at 10 examples of a forced boss rush done right, whether weaved into the level really well, or just a good boss rush in general. Points for creativity, and 1 per series. Grab your boss gauges, let's get started. You're climbing the Tower of Fate, destined to save your ally from the clutches of the Enchantress. And you ruin the feast of your enemies, who decide to have a rematch Battle Royale style. You have to defeat all 8 members one at a time, the only break being the food served after each fight. The cool thing is that the order you fight them in is random. Even when you die, you might get a new foe at the start, keeping you on your toes in order to remember their strategies. What we have here is the perfect example to start off our list. The knights' respective themes backing them up, to even how they enjoy their meal. It's a fun battle. You even get the choice of saving the knights or just leaving them hanging. Just be glad Kratos didn't swoop in. Heard he's got some anger issues. Anyone who's seen my past review of Mutants Manhattan know that I didn't like it as much as I should have. In that review, I mentioned the boss rush at the TCRI building, and despite me not liking most of the bosses, this was honestly a decently designed boss rush. Who would have thought? Ascending the tower to face off against Krang, each boss will meet you one more time to stop you. The rooms are randomly generated each time you play the level, so sure, it's the same boss, but at least the only thing that stays the same is the final bout with Krang. If the bosses were more enjoyable, this would have made it higher on the list. Still, credit where credit's due, it's an okay boss rush with some unique dialogue. Oh, please let Shredder's Revenge be awesome, please. Final Fantasy X is one of my favorite RPGs. The interesting story, memorable characters, and a really fun turn-based system. Nearly perfect if not for that final boss. But before that final battle, a really neat boss rush takes place. One by one, you need to summon your Aeons, i.e. summons, and battle them to make the final boss show up to end the story. To have to fight your possessed allies one by one is a really cool idea, especially since their stats and health are determined by how much you level them up. Even optional Aeons like Anima and Yojimbo will appear if you acquire them before this point. How difficult the battle is depends on how much you use the summons, which is both a good thing and a bad thing, even with auto life backing you up, making it impossible to lose. It's a really great idea, sadly followed by the weakest final boss in RPG history. Almost, I'm sure, but hey, no need to judge. Praise be to Evan for a pretty cool boss rush. If you want to know who started the boss rush trend, most would say Capcom with the Mega Man games, and there's no finer example than the Robot Master Room from Mega Man 2. Simply defeat the 8 robots again to reach Wily at the end. And yet, that simplicity is what makes it so memorable. Being able to choose the order you fight and needing to remember what weaknesses work for what boss feels like the perfect bookend for the game. This would follow suit for every classic Mega Man game and even the X games, so it must have been the working formula. I'm not sure whether to thank it or despise it. What about you, Metal Man? Yeah, I thought so too. For the amount of bosses in Kingdom Hearts, I'm honestly surprised there aren't many boss rushes. Sure, there's the Day to 13, but they're optional, so it doesn't count. And the other boss rush... well, I may touch upon that later. Luckily, the end of the Darkseeker saga has the perfect setup, as the Guardians of Light battle the 13 Darknesses. The new 13 Darknesses, not the original 13 Darknesses, which would forge the... my head hurts! You team up with fellow Guardians to take on the Darknesses, multiple at a time, and it feels like the purest trip down memory lane. And if you're a Kingdom Hearts fan, the satisfaction as you continue feels extremely satisfying. From the heartfelt farewells of each organization member, to the reunions of the Days and Birth by Sleep trios, and the music, as always, is a blessing. Thank the Lord we have Forza Finale. Please listen to it if you ever get the chance. With just a minor puzzle in between, it's a gauntlet that never slows down. A satisfying end to our favorite antagonists. Well, except one, but I won't be bitter this time. While it's one of the lesser known great games for the Wii, Sin and Punishment Star's successor is a great on-rail shooter. For the sake of this video, however, let's discuss the final stage, Coalescence. After ransacking a space station, you refight the main bosses from each of the previous stages, one at a time. Except with a little twist. Unlike most boss rushes, each boss takes on a new form, which means new strategies to adapt to. The boss may seem familiar, or not, this game has a lot of boss designs, but I appreciate the attempt of unique bosses instead of the same ones again. With great music for the background and good bosses to boot, this is just another boss rush I was pleased to be a part of. Oh, and the boss rush is in... Sorry, couldn't resist. Hard to believe Kid Icarus Uprising is 10 years old this year, even though my wrists won't let me forget. The great writing, the stellar cast, the somehow even more stellar presentation, especially for an only 3DS game. Can I say that? And of course, one of my favorite boss rushes. And I know what you're thinking, but no, not Chapter 26. That boss rush is after the final boss, so it's technically optional. What I mean is Chapter 24, the 3 Trials. In order to prepare for the final battle, you take on Dinthos' Trials, which can be summed up as a glorified boss rush. First, you deal with past enemies and 3 previous bosses, which you would think are the 3 Trials, but then the second trial begins with 2 new bosses one after another. First is a rematch with Gal teamed up with Magnus, and then the Instrument of My Nightmares. Then it's the final trial against your reward, the Great Sacred Treasure. This level alone has 6 bosses, including 3 original foes to take down. And the final foe being a giant mech, oh, it's a lot of fun. Add the elements that make Uprising fantastic, and you have a fun time before the final level. Now, if only we had an amiibo for that. Or, you know, a remake or a port to the Switch. That works too. Mega Man may be the Capcom series known for its bosses, but right alongside it is Devil May Cry. From a lava spider to the Quantum Ranger, there are some great fights. And bad, but forget about them for now. In Devil May Cry 3 is a great concept for a boss rush. The boss portals. In Mission 18, your path is blocked by gem-colored tablets, each one leading to a previously fought boss. Now, why would I put this higher than other boss rushes that have new bosses instead of reusing past bosses? Well, this is a boss rush where you don't need to fight all the bosses. If you're smart at choosing the right bosses, you can end the level without having to fight all of them. Something that not every final boss is able to do. It's a great idea letting you choose the bosses you face, like the Robot Master Room, but also picking which ones to face for a possible quick finish, for an easier and less stressful time. The right choice for the bronze medal. Or B rank, I suppose, in this instance. To those who thought World of Light was a pretty slow experience, eat your hearts out! Everything about the final battle in Smash Ultimate is incredible. The climb to the final arena, testing your platforming and combat, only to reach the clashing boss rush. You pick the battles you want, and depending on which you choose, change the aspect of the selection in which DD gets stronger attacks. Yes, it is entirely possible to lose selecting the boss. It all builds up to the rematch with Galeem and Darkon at the same time. It may be similar strategies, but both at once, including dual attacks, makes for an exhilarating time. Plus, it's a final boss that is a boss rush, being able to pick any characters you want, including DLC characters. Sin and Punishment might have done it too, but something about Smash Ultimate having every character team up to fight the deities, it's just so cool! It's great, it's action-packed, it's a stellar boss rush, but not my favorite. That comes up after these honorable mentions. Lava Mountain Act 1 from Sonic Lost World. Different strategies and killer music, sure, but it's still an easy fight. I mean, it is Lost World. Cypher Admin Final from Pokemon Coliseum. A good setup for the final area, but I wish the characters were more memorable. Okay, I wish most of them were memorable. Don't hate me. Shaft from Castlevania Rondo of Blood. Honoring the legacy bosses, going against the fake main villain, but I never played Rondo of Blood up to this point, so a mention is all I can give. Baldur's Tower from Bayonetta. Climbing the tower, facing off against angelic abominations. Must be a platinum game. Mission 89, Kingdom Hearts 358 Days Over 2. A cute boss rush traveling all over Twilight Town, but... Nope, just a mention, moving on! Boss Blitz Galaxy from Super Mario Galaxy 2. Facing off against several bosses from the previous games, it's a great idea. Sadly, it's considered optional since it's after the final boss. Oh well, maybe next time. Cuphead is an amazing game. You can almost get away with saying the entire game itself is a boss rush. Recognizable characters, amazing presentation, and one of the coolest boss rushes, King Dice in All Bets Are Off. You're thrown onto a board game where depending on where you land, you get a unique boss fight. Get lucky enough and you may get an extra hit point for the gauntlet. Reach the end and you face off against King Dice to end the showdown, and man, this is a great encounter. Alcohol, a claw machine monkey, a cigarette bud, so many memorable designs for all of these bosses. It's a shame that you only have to do a few of them to get to the final encounter. Although, I guess you could face off against everyone if you wanted to. It's entirely possible, and it's one of the reasons why this boss rush is just fantastic. It's similar to Gunstar Heroes, if you remember that game. But given this is Cuphead, you're in for a tough bout. The great part is, if a boss is too hard to handle, you can try a different boss and plan your path to have enough hit points for King Dice's showdown. A perfect way to implement strategy into a boss rush. It's the battle before the devil. Of course it's tough, but the pure satisfaction from winning makes this all the sweeter. The unique bosses, the clever gauntlet strategy, and everything else in between makes this my favorite mandatory boss rush. You're in for a hell of a time. I'm the Gaming Genius, and I can safely say this wish has been granted.